Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
One of the things that I want to talk about is we got a tweet, or I saw a tweet from Senator Gelser that we didn't do in follow-up that I want to bring up because she was making a point that I hadn't thought about on cell phones and other personal electronics in schools. So the American Bar Association Commission on Disability Rights tweeted, as schools increasingly impose limits or outright bans on cell phones and other devices, disability advocates are warning that the moves could impede access to much needed assistive technology. And so Senator Sarah Gelser-Bluen retweets this, and she says, access to personal tech has been a game changer for kids with disabilities. It provides time management, augmented communication, anxiety support, access to adaptive material, and more. Device bans will harm these students, impede learning, and further separate kids with greatest needs from their peers. And so I replied and said we would talk about this on the podcast, which is one of the reasons I didn't want to forget to do it. And she said, thank you. I appreciate concern about the impact of excessive recreational device use on youth. However, a ban not only deprives kids of needed support, but avoids teaching skills needed to manage device use. This is a soft skill we all need. And that's very true. I just took my kids for their regular checkups, and one of the questions they ask is how much screen time. And I'm not doing a very good job measuring it, but pediatricians are recommending right now about 2 hours of screen time for kids. Not too much, they don't recommend too much more than that.
That
So we're
includes
working on curbing, yes, TV and devices. That's the hard part, right?
2
The video
hours.
games, I know. And so we're probably not at 2 hours, but we've been trying to curb it down a little bit. And I noticed that when we do that, Oliver's attitude improves. And when we start to do too much devices, he gets a little anxious, and his attitude can be a little snippy. So we're working on that. But I think it's a really good point, and this is just a point I hadn't thought about with the cell phone. So I appreciate Senator Gelser-Bluen bringing that out.
Well, I definitely, well, the other thing with the cell phone stuff, and I remember with my kids, and now they're probably on their cell phones more than anything, but you have to teach them how to put it down.
Right.
And, and my older son, he's in college now, but he does a pretty good job. He doesn't play video games much anymore. He'll get on there and play some stuff when him and his buddies are hanging out on the weekends in his dorm room. But I mean, he's so focused on school and stuff, and he's kind of worked past it. The younger son is still kind of stuck on reels and all the stuff that's on fun on social media, right? And he's making his own, and like him and his buddies, they take their trucks and they go do cool stuff, and they create videos, and they're fun, and he's got a decent number of views and everything. But he's doing it for fun versus, just sitting there on the couch watching it. Like that's where I think it's bad. So I think he's learned that his device can be used so you can sit there and go make reels and get out and about with your truck,
Yeah.
and they run around town and they take cool different shots of their different trucks and things like that. Well, you know what? They're out there doing stuff, right? So they're not just sitting there on the couch, flipping up or, whatever the scenario. And I think that's the difference, is really showing him. Of course, he's not there yet. He still sits on the couch and flips reels too. But if I could go back and my kids would be your age now, I think you're doing the right thing. Is you have to teach them how to use it responsibly, because the cell phone is ingrained. It literally is ingrained, like taking your wallet with you, right? Like back in the day, like people, oh, where's my cell phone? Where's my cell phone? Like everybody has it. You can go to any doctor's office in the country today and look in the waiting room, and 98% of them are on their cell phones while they're waiting for the doctor to call them. But you know what? That's a great place for you to be on your cell phone, is because that waiting room sucks. I mean, I remember back in the day before there's cell phones, it was the worst going to the dentist's office and reading some magazine from 14 years ago, in the waiting room because you're bored. So, and I think our kids just have to be trained. And I think what Senator Gelser was saying, which I thought was a really good, is you can't you can't do a knee jerk, just ban everything. Because there's a group of kids that she obviously is very special needs. She gets very clued into that group, and that has benefited from having the personal electronic devices with them, right? So we do need to teach our kids that they just need to be responsible with them. And I'm seeing that my kid now with in his classes, like when the one teacher, they come in, they all just throw them in a box. The teacher does his lecture, and if they get their homework done, then he lets them bring their homework up, and then they get their cell phone for the rest of the class period. And I talked to my kid the other day about it, and I goes, oh, hey, guess what? Because he was kind of complaining, and I said, guess what? Hasn't changed your life at all. Like, it's all good, and guess what? Your grades are better. And I think there's something to it. So we just need to be focused on it, and we'll get there.
Great points. Well, Brian, one of the things that we're doing here is we're going through all of these legislative races. We've already covered the Senate. Now it's time to talk about the House of Representatives. And I think where I'd like to start, if it makes sense for you, I don't know how you arrange your notes, but let's talk about the 4 seats that Democrats think they can win. And let's talk about where those seats are at, right? So I'm going to run through, and I would say the one that they really want badly is House District 22. I don't think we have any majority minority House districts, but this one is the closest. It has the highest non-white population. And Mr. Massage himself, Anthony Medina, lost this in 2 years ago to Tracy Kramer. Tracy's running again, Democrats with the candidate Leslie Munoz, I think is her name.
Yeah.
Kind of a union activist type, running
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
They believe and talk about that in a presidential year they can win this seat. And I've repeated this to them, and I said that is a great talking point. Sounds good. It's one of 4 seats, by the way, the Republicans hold that Joe Biden won in 2020. I said, here's your problem with your talking point. You have to assume that voters are going to revert to their 2020 behavior, their 2016 behavior, their 2012 behavior, and especially with the Hispanic voting population, we see poll after poll nationally showing Democrats win the Hispanic vote, but the margin is shrinking and is shrinking rapidly. And if those trends don't reverse, they're not going to win this seat. That's my basic take on it. You want to take us a little deeper on this?
No, and they still don't want to give up on it because Munoz just dropped what 300 grand in broadcast TV. You
Yeah,
know,
they
they're-
have to. I think they have to compete.
but it's so crazy because the seat goes from Northeast Salem, up to Woodburn. So it's this weird little sliver. It's the smallest house district in the state. And they're spending 300 grand on broadcast TV in Portland to reach these voters. It's
Crazy.
a classic mix of talk about just blowing money. Some media buyer's happy, but I think you're right. Tracy's outraised Munoz. Representative Kramer's raised $423,000, which is really impressive, even for an
Yeah.
incumbent. That for her to haul in that amount of money, obviously got a bunch of support from her other members, which has been great. But we know this one was a tough one. Republicans were trying to win this seat off and on over the last 20 years, and they just couldn't do it. And we got it done last cycle.
Yeah.
One of the best pickups we got last cycle, and it was really really pretty cool to see. And Tracy and I won a bottle of liquor from her husband Jake because we won this seat, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's since gone, so Jake, if you're listening, I could use another one. But it wasn't Pappy Van Winkle, don't worry. And then the other thing that I'll notice, so this was a minus 7.4% to us, to Republicans.
Hmm.
January 23, it's now only minus 6.7. So
Wow.
what you just said, the trend is not good for them.
Nope.
And that's for a House seat to move 7/10 of a point in a year and a half is pretty good movement for that seat.
100%.
So it really is moving our way. And guess what? I think Rep Kramer's done a dang good job as a representative. And I think that's also part of it. So they're going to try to buy their way to victory here. I think they're going to run into a wall then on
Nice. Nice.
um on that, because this was also, by the way, one of our pickups that we got with Congressman Walden. So I don't think he's excited to let it go back to the other side. So, and the reason why is because of these trends, like the seats, these 4 seats that we talked about, ones that we picked up last cycle. The reason why they're so great because every one of them now is trending Republican
Yeah.
from that time. So that's what I really like about these 4 seats and us holding the 25 seats in the House, is just the simple fact that these seats have all gotten better since
And
22.
they were won in 2022 in a year that was expected but not actually a red wave. So you won them in a what I would call a competitive year, not a hard Republican year, right? In a hard Republican year, you guys were looking at not 4 pickups, but more like 6
Yeah.
or 8.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree.
there's room to grow there for the R's. So next door, just a hair south,
Yeah.
the Salem Boot. If you look at House District 21, looks kind of like a boot, kind of
Yeah.
like a combat boot. The candidate for Republicans not wearing combat boots. It's attorney Kevin Mannix, a well-known political figure in Oregon, and he won this seat by looks like about 6 points 2 years ago, almost 6 points. And this one, I think, is one that Democrats want, and they're running. But one of the things I've noticed, kind of talking to his camp, Dems are only running heavy negative against Mannix. And typically, this is just how I look at it. If you're running positive and negative, it's a competitive race. If you're running only positive, you're probably up pretty good. And if you're running only negative, you're probably losing. And so my guess is that Virginia Stapleton, the Democrat from the Salem City Council, is probably losing this race. And I mean, one of the things that Mannix hit her on is voting against affordable housing in Salem. Not usually a good thing to do. She was worried about the traffic, the parking situation there. So that's why she voted against affordable housing. So I'm sure everybody without a house or with rent
Yeah.
that would like to buy a house is pretty excited about that. But I just don't think I think Democrats say they got an amazing recruit. I do not think Virginia Stapleton's a very good candidate. And Kevin Mannix is sort of like Trump, not in the sense that he behaves like Trump, but because people already know him. They know that he worked on crime ballot initiatives. And also, as you pointed out, DA's race in Portland, crime was kind of an issue. They're running against Mannix on crime. I do not think that's going to work. I think people kind of know who Mannix is on crime. He's tough on crime. He's been a Democrat. He's been a Republican. He's been a Republican for a long time now. He isn't the world's hardest right Republican. He's sort of, Tim Knopp in the sense that he was more conservative and then has moved. He represents his district. So I think again, this is one that they got to put on the board because they got to say they're going after it. But I do not think that at the end of the day, if they've got, a final million to spend, that it's going to end up in this district.
That's good. All good points. You know Salem pretty well, and Kevin's consultant, David Collado, who we both know well. I mean, they know Salem well. They know these neighborhoods. They know
Yeah.
how they perform. They know how to win in them. I think, Stapleton, didn't she also vote for the payroll tax? Wasn't she kind of behind that, the Salem
I think
payroll
so.
tax? Yeah, so
Yep.
that's not
That'll
good.
hurt.
Yeah, and that one failed pretty miserably. I think that's a tough kill. Kevin's raised 400,000 to her 122. I mean, but if you're
Yeah.
Dems, right, you gotta throw some money out there. It's a minus what I got it here, minus 3.7 it was, and now it's only a minus 3.6. So it hasn't moved as much. So maybe they're
Yeah.
thinking, there's a little bit of movement there. Kevin does a pretty good job of running the middle, I mean, I would say that he's a center right Republican. I mean, he's probably further right on some issues and a little further
Yeah.
left on some other issues, but
Like walkouts. Oh, sorry.
yeah, yeah, he's very well known, and yeah. And
This was a reference to when Kevin Mannix was trying to helpfully negotiate the end of the walkout, which we did not ask him to do, but water under the bridge.
inside joke. Yeah, inside joke. I think. And I only fear here is probably turnout could be an issue, I think.
Yeah.
I think that that's also a fear that I have for Tracy Kramer, being that they're kind of next to each other. There is some CD5, some CD6 kind of flowing through both of these. So that should help, I would think, for Republicans to turn out and all the things. So
You need
that
Mike to step on the gas here with the advertising and GOTV efforts.
yeah, that would be my biggest concern. I think Kevin's a tough one to attack. I mean, there's not a lot that he's really you could go after him for being old, I guess, and do the Joe Biden thing. I don't think that would work.
Virginia. Oh, I do have to point this out. Virginia Stapleton's main piece of her campaign, her social media is wild. She's got a TikTok account. She's doing all of the trends. She does some of the weirdest stuff, including this one TikTok where, so I'm a Bears fan. So I was aware when the Bears picked Caleb Williams as the number one pick, they traded
Yeah.
up to get him and a quarterback. Okay, there was, I can't remember if it couldn't have been the draft room, but there was a room of Bears fans watching who did not want them to pick Caleb Williams, and so they announced with the number one pick, the Bears select Caleb Williams, and then just booing. Virginia Stapleton used that audio in her reel about how her being, kind of implying she's the number one pick in the number one race. She left the booing in the audio. I'm like, why? I'm no social media expert, but do you really want audio of people booing you on social media?
Yeah.
So like she's leaning into this being young, this TikTok thing, which is obviously in contrast to Mannix, but she's not doing a very good job of it. It is strange to me. I know I'm not the youngest
Yeah.
person. I can't. One of my slightly younger friends was talking about sending something on Snapchat, and I was like, "What are you, 14? Like, come on."
Yeah.
Anyway, but I just had to point that out because it's hilarious. So go watch for entertainment value Virginia Stapleton's social media. It's hilarious and bad.
I haven't watched it, so I'll have to go take a look. I do enjoy a good laugh on social.
Yep. So let's drive up the coast, drive
Yeah,
up highway, was it Highway 101? Did I get that right?
that
And
is the name.
this 32nd district with a wonderful guy named Cyrus Javity, the Republican incumbent. He was elected by 2.4 points 2 years ago, running against not Logan Lady anymore. This list has not been updated with Andy Davis, now an Astoria city councilor, I believe, a Democrat candidate. This is a district that voted, a little more blue for U.S. Senate, almost 9 points. For president, dead even, like the last two presidential elections, lean Republican for governor by 3 points. So it's kind of all over the place and a very competitive environment. Javity's one who's done a pretty good job, again, hanging out in that middle area. I think not going too hard right, certainly not going hard left. And I think I'm hot take. Logan Lady will do better than Andy Davis, but Logan left to get a real job
Mm.
because the legislature doesn't pay anything. Andy Davis, a last minute swap in. I actually think Logan Lady's name ID was an asset that Democrats lost here. And they didn't pick up. There was a couple big names floating around that would have brought real
Yep.
star and fundraising and firepower. They didn't get those guys. They got, white bread. Andy Davis. That's about the whitest bread name that's out there. I'm
You-
just saying. So this
You'd
is my
almost
hot
think
take.
it's
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, Majority Leader Ben. This one I feel like actually didn't go your way this time.
I think he'll claim that it wasn't his, he wasn't there when they were
But
recruiting.
certainly he wasn't in control of that
No,
situation.
but it does sound like a Republican name, Andy Davis. I'll give you that. Like
Certainly
somebody
not
we would, it's
BIPOC.
like somebody we would recruit, Andy Davis, and they would get Cyrus Javity, right? So true. Um,
That's good stuff.
I love Cyrus. I've known Rep Javity now for a couple of years. I think he fits that district, even though his name doesn't. Um, he's really come to become a staple on the coast and doing his work there. I think the calculation was that maybe they have a better shot at this district when the Senate seats up next time and they can try to run two together,
Yeah.
put some momentum behind it. At the time, you had Biden running against Trump, which probably I think if they could go back and redo it with a Harris ticket, I bet they would find a female or something that fits more their strategy that would fall in line there. Because I think to your point, this district is all over the place. And if
Yeah.
taken for granted, Democrat can sweep this district up. I mean, in 2020, even though it was redistricted, but mostly stayed the same. It was the most expensive House race. I think it still actually is the most expensive House race that we've had. So when Rep Weber won it back in 2020, so when we took it,
Yep.
wrestled it from the D's as part of the takeover of the coast. So Javity can't take it for granted. He's raised $324,000, so he's definitely put some time into fundraising, and Davis hasn't really done a whole bunch. And I don't know. I don't see the Dems going after this one. It's a tough one to buy media in because it's Portland media again for just the coast. You're
Yeah.
buying Portland media.
So expensive.
There's I think 3 cable zones up there too, so it makes it very disgruntling to as a buying scenario. So you're stuck with
Mhm.
mail and kind of like local radio because you got all these like real independent towns, right? You got Seaside and Tillamook and Astoria and all these like towns that aren't really, you know, they're not all the same, right? They're very different. And you can't go to one, you can't go to Pacific City and then drive over to Tillamook and have the same issues at the same town halls. Like, so you're really
True.
stuck knowing your homework in these coastal towns. So I would imagine that they don't do a whole bunch in this one and they focus more on those 2 Salem seats is my thinking.
Yeah. All right, and then the final one, House District 52. To me, this is the least of the vulnerable seats here. For instance, the margin was 5 points for Jeff Helfrich, the Republican leader, voted for governor by almost the same margin. Democrat for president, but have never seen this one as being super competitive. The Democrat here, Nick Walden Poublon, uh, maybe he changed his middle name to Walden just to get that notoriety. I don't know. Maybe he's related. We can ask Greg. I think I heard he wasn't, but who knows here? But I think he's a kind of a weird guy. You look at his Twitter. I'll just link a couple of his tweets, which he should definitely delete. Um, Kind of, yeah, not again, no star recruiting here. And I just don't, I think Democrats need a much better candidate, somebody with local government experience to really put a lot behind this guy,
Yeah,
behind this race.
yeah, I don't know if having the name Walden helps you because I think Congressman Walden lost Hood River in
That's
2018.
right. That's right. So he tried to be smart
Maybe these
running
people
on
vote
his name
against
and
him
it
thinking they're related, right? So,
didn't work. Yeah.
yeah, I think Rep Helfrich, Leader Helfrich should be just fine. I think he's got to do the work. He's got to do, the town halls and all the things and go up and down the district that he did when he won this seat. I mean, you gotta treat it like it matters. But
Right.
it doesn't appear because I really think that East Gresham, going and it goes over the top of Sandy, so it's kind of north. That area there should carry him to victory pretty strongly, I think. And I think the Dalles, which is the other part of this district, and everything else kind of is pretty blue. Hood River and kind of like the Mount Hood area is all pretty blue, but I think the Dalles was kind of the purple area of this, and he did a really good job of carrying the Dalles last time. So I think that area's kind of continued to move to the right. So I think he should be fine. It's really just a matter of doing the work, spending the money, and doing the mail pieces and stuff and talk about it. And he's done a good job of delivering some dollars back to the communities there and all the things. I mean, they got the new bridge. I mean, what more do they want? So but you're right. I think it should be fine. I don't know if it's the safest of the four. We'll find out. I think that he's maybe more like the third safest of these.
Mm,
Would be my opinion. So we'll see if we win. Maybe we'll have to rank. Oh, let's rank them real quick.
Yeah.
One, two,
Well,
three, four.
here's one of Nick's weird tweets. I'm not ready to get rid of democracy over the price of a carton of eggs. Don't know anybody who's proposing that. I'm not ready to burn down the country over the price of a gallon of gas. Again, not something anyone is suggesting doing. Weird stuff.
Yes.
All right, rankings. You want to do yours first? You want me to
Yeah,
do
sure.
mine first?
I
'Cause
just marked mine. I think.
all right, go for it.
So I'll rank them from who wins the most to who wins the least.
Okay, all right.
But I think they all win. I don't think the Democrats actually pull out any victories here. So
Okay,
I think Kevin Mannix gets the largest margin of victory, then
okay,
Jeff Helfrich, then Javity, then Kramer.
okay. I like that. I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. Um, and I'm gonna rank mine with slightly different criteria. I'm gonna pretend I'm the Democrat majority leader, and I'm gonna say I have to triage these races. I gotta say where are we spending our dollars first. So I would not put any money, and I would say the safest one is Helfrich to be consistent with myself here. I would say next safest is Kramer. I really believe that this
Okay.
district is a Republican district now, and it isn't going back. Not until the trends change in terms of minority voters and who they're going for. Right now, they're going for Republicans, and Democrats have done nothing to reverse the slide besides play the regular identity politics game, which they've been doing for years now. So then I'll do Mannix, and just a little bit because you know Kramer, I think, has the benefit of the district moving her direction, whereas he does not. I think he still wins, but maybe a little closer just because they're trying what they've tried to do, and they did this at the Salem Senate seat. They're trying to carve up Salem in a way that makes it so Republicans can't win it anymore. And they did that successfully on the Senate side. They haven't been able to get there on the House side just because of these
Yeah.
lines and Woodburn being such a problem. So, and then I'll say number one is still Javity. Those numbers for some of the higher offices are still really heavy Democrat. It's not like Dick Anderson's seat or some of the other coastal seats that have swung hard, even to Trump. This district is not yet a Trump district. So that's why I sort of think that he could be potentially in the most trouble. But again, I still believe that he wins at the end of the day. Ours go 4 for 4. So the way you'd know on election night if we were having a bad night would be if one of these four were going down. And obviously, one of
Yeah.
them could be behind a tiny bit and win with late ballots. The trend has been that Republicans are winning some of the late ballots, but if they're down by 5 or more, you start to really get concerned for how the night's going to go.
Yeah. Good takes. That'll be interesting to see.
All right. So now we pivot to I would say this side of the map, I don't know as well in terms of the Dem opportunities, right? We're kind of going based on the districts that were close last time.
You mean Republican
But
opportunities?
yes, Republican opportunities. You're right. Democrat defense. Okay. There's a clear number one race, and I think we should just start with that one. House District 53. It is a race that Republicans and specifically the Republican candidate 2 years ago, whose name we will not mention, lost this race. This was an incredibly winnable race that was lost by the candidate. And there were any number of things that went wrong. There's a few of these races, the Senate race in Salem from a couple of years ago, that I can, you can think of that happened there with in 2020, where a lot of things were going wrong. And if one or two of those things go wrong, you win the race, but all 10 of them went wrong. And so you lost, right? This is one of those seats where ours should have held the seat, and they didn't. So it's one where, for president, voted Republican in 2016, voted Democrat in 2020, but a 3 point swing, right? It's still in that middle territory where it's moving around. Voted for Drazen by 1.5. Um, Democrats won it 2 years ago. Emerson Levy 1.3. She's got a very well recruited and very qualified opponent, Carrie Lopez, who we've had on the program, school board member, and uh, is this race, Brian? Are you seeing it continue to turn into the dogfight that everybody thinks it should be this cycle?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the money indicates that, right? The money flowing to Emerson Levy, 344,000, a
Yep.
couple, and then 200,000 to Gary Lopez, and so they're both compared to the other races that we'll talk about. I mean, it's clearly, well, one, Carrie's done her job in fundraising for herself, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
That's been huge. And so is Emerson, to be honest with you. So she's been able to drag a lot of money out of the lobby and all the things, and she's tried to, have the votes that she needs to have to be considered that moderate in this race. And they had a debate last night on KTVZ, and
Mm.
I even had a few representatives text me, and they're like, draw. It was a draw, and I think this is one that could come down to not two votes, but it could be close.
I think it'll be one where, regardless of who's ahead, both candidates are going to be following up with the people whose signatures are messed up, right?
Yeah,
There's going to
yeah.
be a ballot chase potential here for sure.
It could, and there's another factor at play, which is Lori Chavez Dreamer's race against
Yeah.
Bynum, which is really kind of galvanized both the bases.
Hmm.
And so we should see a super high turnout in this race. I mean, with a presidential year last year we had this was the highest voter turnout district
Yeah.
because of the Lori Chavez, Jamie McLeod Skinner race, right? So we were breaching 90% in Republicans and Democrats, which is just unheard
Wow.
of. And in a presidential year, we could see a 94% voter turnout.
Jeez.
But if one gets 2% more than the other, that's who wins this race.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think that the NAVs are probably breaking somewhere down the middle of this. I think that it's the only thing that scares me about this race that I caution is, the voter registration has slipped a little bit from
Yeah.
2.7 to a little over 3% now to the Democrat side. Um,
Not moving fast, but moving a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, but it's
that
it's
is a problem.
concerning, and it's not outside of our win factor, right? It's still lower than all of the races we just talked about
Yeah.
that Republicans won. So we still have that factors in our favor, and I think that's why we're competitive here. I think that's why that this one is going to be a dogfight, and I think that you have two candidates that both fashion themselves as, moderate leaning left, moderate leaning right, and probably,
Hmm.
I would say Emerson's way more left on, climate and energy and the things that she advocates for. And then I think you got Carrie that's probably a little bit more right on transgender and some of those abortion and some of those things that, where then on the other stuff, they're both probably pretty moderate in the middle there. So
Yeah.
you do got a very similar set of candidates here. And I would say one that Democrats would love to run in a red district and one that Republicans love to run in a blue district. So
Totally.
it really is going to be a clash. I think it'll be a fun month to be involved in this race. With it, I think they've been cordial with each other. The debate was cordial. They were both even agreeing with each other. I think a couple of times, let's maybe want to pull my hair out if I had any,
Nice.
you know, don't ever agree with them. But Carrie and I talked about that, and it was kind of funny. And I think probably Emerson's people said the same thing. What are you doing agreeing with her? But yeah,
I
it
would
should be a
say
fun
I
race.
would say a tiny bit of agreement isn't bad because I think it gives you an opportunity to say, yeah, we agree about this, but here's where we disagree and where it matters. You
Yeah.
can kind of flip it that way sometimes, but you got to be talented to be able to do that. And I think one of the great things is that Carrie is a talented candidate, one of the more talented candidates I've come across for being new to state ledge. And that's the school board difference, I think, right? When you have candidates who are brand new versus candidates who've run even for something local before. That's a candidate quality plus up or whatever you want to call it.
The only thing I'll say
Um,
this, and I don't think
oh
we
yeah,
have
go ahead.
this race, just my last piece, and we can move forward. But uh, Emerson should have ran for the Senate.
Oh, it's
As soon as your
deal.
dad couldn't run again, she should have ran for the Senate. We wouldn't have been able to recruit Michael Summers. You
Would have
know,
been a walk. Yeah, the
you could
Dems
have
would have put
told
it away.
Anthony Broadman, you go take a back seat. You don't get the front seat your first time running. And she should have ran for Senate. We would have not been able to recruit anybody, of substance to run against her. And then she would not, because even if she ekes this one out, her best case scenario is that they're going to have a hard time recruiting somebody next time, but she's going to be in a battle every time until that voter, because once there's a bad Republic or a bad Democrat year for her, if she even ekes this one out, she's going to get wiped out. Whereas you
Right.
can in that Senate seat, you can weather a
You'd be
storm.
there forever. She'll be there forever if she wanted.
It
Yeah,
was a
I totally agree with
bad,
that.
bad play by her.
Yeah. And I think that, maybe she felt some loyalty, but I'll tell you, if she's down in the polling, she'll get triaged. Like it'll happen. The
Where was
loyalty
the
doesn't go both ways with leadership. Because you
yeah
you have to play the map to win the most seats. And yes, you want to care about the people, but at the end of the day, like that can't be the determining factor.
Rayfield was so loyal, Reagan. He quit being speaker to go run for, you know,
It,
attorney
and
general. Like,
right, and I don't blame him for that. He saw an
no,
opportunity.
it's
Right?
politics. You do what you got to
Yeah.
do. You do what's in the best interest of you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Um, Brian, which of these seats do you think? I just want to talk most likely, the next most likely. That's pretty clearly the most likely Republican flip, 53.
Yeah. Well, let's run
What's
down.
next?
I'll run down a couple here that I think, based on, where they fielded people. I'll tell you the ones that I think are out of bounds and we don't really even have to cover them. How about that? So I think
Okay.
John Lively, Cory Burkett in
Yeah.
Springfield is,
I love
uh,
I love Cory Burkett, and he should run as soon as Lively retires because we'll win this seat. But this is just like the coast with Caddy McEwen. It's just like this seat with Betty Comp.
yep.
The really solid middle guys can be there kind of as long as they want once they get established, and as soon as they leave, it's totally different game.
And then I haven't seen the voter registration movement that I thought I would continue to see in Springfield, and that's a concern for me. It stayed flat at 9.1% plus
Oh yeah, that doesn't
Democrat.
that
So
hurts a little bit.
I thought it was moving a little bit more. I thought they're a little more Trumpy down there in Springfield. So I think it's a tough one for us, and I think Lively, he's also turns out he's a pretty good candidate too, like to your point, right? And it's just a tough
Yeah,
lift. So I'm not going to I wouldn't waste any time or money on that one. However, you need to remain competitive.
yeah,
And
yep.
then the other one that I will take off the map is Jason Fields and Courtney Neron in 26 in Wilsonville. That's a rematch. They've both raised about the same amount of money, but the voter registration was 6.9% in 2023 January. Now it's 7.2. So it's trending the other direction. I think Kamala Harris completely foobars him in his chance to win this one. I think if you had Sleepy Joe still in there, maybe there's a shot because you could have some apathy with the Democrats, but I think that one's off the board.
I totally agree. For U.S. Senate, Ron Wyden won this by 16 points. This place, uh, I get it. We had it a few years ago. This one is done. Like Wilsonville is just it is blue as can be, and not can be as blue as can be, and it's not winnable. And I do not understand the fascination with this race. Yeah, 3 points for governor, but I'll just tell you to win those 3 points is just like a literal nightmare. It's just there aren't any votes there.
Last 3 points is very hard to get.
Ugh.
And a
Yeah.
lot of times you have to do a lot of data analysis to really see, are there even 3 points? Are there really that many? Or is there enough
Right.
undecideds that you can carry that last 3 points and not in this district?
Yeah. And I will say this: there's a candidate quality problem on the Republican side here. And I said this before, there's a lot of Republicans who do not like Courtney Neron, and I get that. But
Yeah,
she has education background and she looks good on a mailer, and that's worth quite a bit.
sure is. It's hard to disagree with
So,
that. Um,
yep.
and rematches never favor the loser.
No, they really do
No.
not. I don't understand why people haven't figured that out. Run for a different office, but
Yeah.
rematches are just they don't work.
Not for the
Yeah,
loser, that's for
not
sure.
for the loser. Yeah. All
The
right.
other one that I'm going to pull off the map is Tom Anderson and David Brown, South Salem.
Which
You
number district is that? I'm sorry,
19,
19.
HD19.
Yeah. This is
The voter registration, it just isn't really, it's about 8.5%. So, and it's been around there. It went 2/10 of a point our direction. The reason why I'll pull this one off is, one, you got an incumbent. I think David Brown's a good candidate. I no
yeah.
problems against him as a candidate. I think that Raquel Moore Green ran in the Senate seat there. She lost this House district when we spent over $2 million.
Yeah.
So, and she was the quasi incumbent as the state rep moving to Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Still lost this seat. There's a lot of union members that live in this district, and they look like NAV voters, but they vote left. And I think that's in a presidential year, and they hate Trump.
Well, and the version of this seat that Raquel won when she was a House member too, because here's the thing they did. So Shelley Bossart Davis's district used to be just Albany, and it used to be an even voter registration, but it always vote hard Republican because it's Lynn County.
Mhm.
What they did was they took like Sublimity and all that stuff and Turner just south of Salem that used to be a 19 that kind of made this a district competitive. They lopped it off and they put it in Shelley Bossart Davis's district. And they did that intentionally to make this seat turn hard blue. And that's exactly what it did. And that was part of the strategy to
Yeah.
win the Senate race. The Senate race would have been winnable with those areas back in there, but they lopped them off on purpose in order to make this more competitive or make it easy, an easy win for Democrats. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Drazen lost this district by 4 points. It's not unlike the Gorsuch seat where she was competitive. Again, that's a hard last 4 points to win.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is we're sort of chasing the 2000 and 2004 soccer moms that were swing voters that ever since Trump have not been swing voters. They are not.
Yeah.
The left has messaged to them pretty hard and mostly on abortion, and they've done an effective job in some of these areas in Salem and Wilsonville and these, smaller than Portland but big city communities.
And districts don't really change their stripes too fast, right? It takes a while for them to, if they're
Yeah.
gradually like the coast was for, it took the coast a while, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to move over to the right. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at. The District 39, I know people looked at this one. It's Janelle Bynum's seat. And I think people looked at it because
Yeah.
it's an open seat. I think Amy Reiner versus April Dobson, right? So you have kind of new fresh faces, newcomers
Yep.
moving in. I think Amy Reiner's done a decent job. She's been very active. She's really done her
Hmm.
best. I think 2000, and it's a 10.5% voter registration advantage to the Democrats. Bynum won it nearly 60-40, spent $1.2 million. She got scared last cycle. We spent what, a couple $100,000, and almost, but then Bynum just put the gas on and it performs. And this seat has always been fool's gold ever since it was won in 2010 by
Yeah.
that kind of fluke year, that snap back from Obama. We win it one time, and Republicans have poured millions into trying to recapture this seat, mostly into Lori Chavez Dreamer, trying
Yeah.
to beat Bynum. But it's fool's gold, man. It doesn't, even if you win it, you don't keep it. And that's my
Yeah.
problem with this seat. So I would rip it off the table. I
Yeah.
like being competitive there. It probably helps Lori in her race to be competitive there. It's that top corner, but you can't win it.
I agree with you.
And then
What's left?
I know, well, I'm getting there. I'm whittling my way. So the two I'll touch on up in Gresham. So I think these, because obviously we're going to try to be competitive in the Senate seat. I'm not involved in the House races up there.
Okay.
I know the two candidates. Paul Dressler's running against Ricky Ruiz, and it's pretty much Gresham, and it's got a little bit of the Rockwood Centennial area, House District 50. It was 10.8%. It's moved to 10.4%. We had a very ineffective candidate last cycle that we ended up not putting any money behind, really. I think we spent like 60 grand or something at the end of the day. She only ended up losing by 900 votes against Ricky.
Yeah.
So it performed pretty well, but it goes back to what we talked about on the Senate seat. I wouldn't give it up. I would definitely push into that because the district performs how you want it to do, regardless of the candidate, as proven last cycle. So, and Paul's a
I'm sorry,
small
Brian. Are we
business
talking
owner.
about 49 or 50? You said
50,
50?
50, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And Paul Dresser's a small business owner. Ricky's, they both, I mean, 75,000 to 78,000. I mean, Ricky's kind of done nothing. I don't really know
Yeah.
what's going on there.
Considering how close his last one is, that is a bit of a surprise.
It is, yeah. And in 49, you have Terry Tipsword, longtime Troutdale businessman. Been there. He's
Hmm.
like 6'7" too, so he's kind of like he's tall, right? He's big,
Jesus.
and it's interesting. Like, yeah, he's when he's in the room, that's for sure. Versus Zach Hudson, who's been there a while, was on the Troutdale City Council. We went after Zach Hudson last time, spent over $600,000. Zach beat us by, I don't know, 880 votes, something like that, against the former mayor. Terry's raised 67,000. Zach's got 114. This one, again, 13.3. It's a high voter registration disadvantage,
Yeah.
but it has moved to 12.9. So I wouldn't take these off the table. If I was in charge, I would just because I would be looking at my how that voters performed in 22. This is going to be a turnout monster, I think. So,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't take them off the table. I think that you got a couple of decently qualified candidates, but I would be concerned that they've only raised, and I know each of them got 25 grand from Greg Walden. So that means they've raised like 40,000 bucks. And then if you go back through there, I bet they've only raised maybe 10 or 15,000 bucks from the district, which would be concerning for me. Compared to somebody like Kerry Lopez who's raised, six figures. So,
Yeah.
um, I think that's a tough one. The last two is John Masterman in District 48 against How Win. And How Win and John was one of those that I recruited him to run 2 years ago when he ran, and he came within, geez, I don't know, 2.5%, something like that. It was like 600 votes or something against How Win, who's she was a newcomer out of the David Douglas area. And this is that weird district that kind of has Damascus and the outskirts of Boring, South Gresham, and then it just carves down Foster Road and kind of until it hits like 205. So it's kind of a very interesting district from that standpoint. It's moved to the right a little bit. It's moved about 2/10 of a point, which is concerning to me that it hasn't moved enough. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing that is How Win is raised and spent nearly $250,000, and Masterman has raised $60,000. So I think that How Win knows that she didn't have a large margin, so she's putting the effort in. This is a very, I don't, she's spending a lot of money on TV. It's just a weird blob district that fell out of redistricting, and these people are blue collar people. It's a good opportunity for Republicans. I'll go to my same Jason Fields, Courtney Neron thing here, that at the end of the day is having a rematch the best thing for you. Even though How Win, I think, would probably be in my top 5 for the most unrecognizable state house members in Salem, which we should do, by the way. We should do we'll do
I
that later. Like, who's there that you have no idea that's there? I think top 5,
I
that would be great.
there's one rep I literally cannot remember as a state representative.
I think it's the
And
same
yes.
one both of you and I were thinking of, but
No, it isn't actually. I have a different
okay,
one,
all right,
but
let's
this will
do
be
that
fun.
next episode. That'd be fun. But you can't really, I haven't seen any polling in this race. I think I saw some polling early in the summer and midsummer that showed the generic ballot about even or so,
Yeah.
but both candidates are completely unknown for the most part. But Masterman has run twice. He ran for an ESD afterwards, so he's been on the ballot. I don't know. I think he fits the district a little bit more than she does, but I think the Democrats will make sure that she wins because I don't think they want this one to be competitive.
No, they don't.
Um, and it shouldn't with that much voter registration advantage. I mean, 12% should be out of our reach.
Well, in my speculation here is like she's running a real campaign. The other guys who were close last time aren't. There's one or two things that are happening. Either their internals show they're ahead and they're not working because of it, or they are not, they're just not working and their caucuses will freak out and spend money for them. I mean, that happens
Yeah.
sometimes. And so credit to Huawei for running like she's got a close race. And credit for Masterman for making it close despite the fundraising deficit. I agree. I would put this ahead of a lot of the other districts, actually. that they're trying to win. I think that if they wanted, I think a lot of people want to put money in other districts and they want to avoid this one. And I would actually put this towards the top of the list. I might put it right below 53, honestly,
Yeah.
just
I
because of how
agree.
it's a little wacky. I get it. It goes against all of the things we just said about all the other districts about how winnable they are. But there are those weird unicorns. And, sometimes you want to chase a unicorn for a little while till you get to the edge of the rainbow and the pot of gold. And I think I mixed my
Well,
metaphors there,
and I
but
think, and I'm gonna layer onto that why I agree with you that this seat would move up in my consideration as well is I think it's hard to pull. I think
mm,
the people that answer the phones or the people that don't have jobs and stuff like that, and they're going to vote D. I think that the D's are spending money because I bet that the generic, if it was similar to what I saw, and I bet her name ID is probably in the teens. So they figured all they ought to do is raise their name ID, and then they can move this district out of whack versus, and I'll give you a nugget here. So compared to like Senator Anderson, whose name ID is reaching, if not above 60% in his name ID. Whereas if
yeah.
you're in the teens and you're generic, that means
Hmm.
that's ripe for being able to, that means people don't know who you are and don't care. So your ability to get taken over is a real easier one to get to, right? So I would imagine that's why they're spending money. I would imagine that there's going to be, and I think I think this thing outperforms polling. So I agree
Hmm.
with you on that one because it outperformed our polling last time. And I
Yeah.
just think it's a hard one to pull. This is a very weird finger district that runs through. And I know this, I lived on Foster Road up and down that thing. And there's so much trash on Foster Road. These people are so tired of the trash and the junk that they want change in that Powell Boulevard, Foster Road area. It's so sad that I think it will do a lot better than they think. So I would make this my flyer one and I'd throw money. If I had lots of money, I'd throw money at it because I think the Democrats would freak out and spend a ton. This is one of those where you could get, if you had, a lot of money, you could get probably 7 to 8 times your money on this one because the
I
Democrats would
totally
freak
agree
out
with
and
that.
spend, like
Yeah.
you were saying earlier, like if we spend for every dollar we spend, they got to spend five or
Yeah.
six to maintain it.
Totally
So,
agree.
and you know what I do here too? Nothing but mail.
Yeah.
Like I would
I
just
agree with
run
that.
mailers and just say, you're tired of this in your front yard? Vote a different way. Like
Yeah.
just flood it with trash.
That's totally. I think that's a valid strategy. I think, and especially on a flyer race, just keep rolling the mail in. That makes sense. You don't really
Yeah.
have to keep all of the other pieces moving, and it's a lot less expensive than buying TV and digital and all that.
100,000 in
And
mail to NAVs
yeah.
and league Dems buys you probably 14 pieces of mail.
Yep.
And I buy, TV, all that. You can't buy cable there. It's in some stupid zone. It's two half zones that you can't buy. You can't buy broadcast. Digital's even hard because it doesn't have its own generic zip code. So you're reaching people that aren't in your deal. And I would really, unless you're geofencing or something, which is very difficult to do too. It's unreliable. Just mail,
Yeah.
man. Mail, mail, mail,
Yeah.
mail, mail. Mail, mail. If you're listening out there, mail, 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 mail.
Look, I love mail. It's my favorite medium. I've never been like I said, one of these days you're gonna have to teach me how to do TV because that's where the money is, a lot of it. But I like mail. I like coming up with mailers. You get creative. You can do a few with not a huge budget. I mean, I'm working on some Albany City Council races, and we'll be able to do a couple pieces of mail and we'll be able to have some fun with them. We've got a guy who ran for school board that had two ethics violations while he was on the school board, and we just absolutely nuked him with those to beat him, and he popped his head up again. So we're gonna have to teach him a lesson again, apparently. So,
Cool.
um,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
mail's definitely, if you're running on a less budget, I would say that's where you need to be in the mail because for 60 cents, 48 cents, whatever it is, you're running your mail piece. It's
yeah.
cheaper, faster, and quicker than trying to do doors. It's cheaper than
Oh man,
the cost, to put yourself on TV, especially in a district like this. It's very difficult to media buy versus other districts. I think that's you just man, this is the gripe I always have with when I see consultants that do stuff, or just candidates really, because they're responsible for it. They'll hire a consultant that does the same crap. And it's like, well, you can't do district A that's the same as district B. Like you have to look at the district and you have to tailor the campaign to what you're trying to do. You can't do it. And then you also have to tailor the candidate, right? So, and you said that earlier, like Courtney Neron looks good on a piece of mail. And that matters. Some people you try to put them on TV and they just look like hell. And you're like, I can't put you on TV, right? So, or they shouldn't speak on TV. I've seen so many people speak on TV and you're like, who looked at that TV ad and thought that person should be talking? It's reality.
That's one of those things where you just think you can slot every candidate into the same system, and it doesn't always work. I mean, we had a candidate that was running for something local and came in and recorded. No, it was a surrogate. We had come in for a candidate to record radio. They were well known. They were heavy smokers, not good for radio. And I ended up sitting there and recording the exact.
This is Bryan.
Yeah. I ended up sitting there because you're on a budget and just recording the script. They're like, "Oh, your voice is fine. It'll be good." So I guess that was how I got into
Oh, you're
podcasting.
a voiceover guy, huh? Look at you.
I did a voiceover because we were in a pinch and we weren't gonna buy a voiceover. And the person we had, after they left, the radio guy was like, "That was some of the worst audio I'd ever heard. Do you want to just record it and then I'll send them to you?" And I said, "Sure." So anyway, crazy stuff.
I did voiceover. I was the voice of Mike's Fence Center for probably 10 years. I would do their stuff before the jingle would come.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You didn't sing the jingle. I was hoping you were singing Mike's Fence Center. Which, by the way, I would like to collect revenue from the ad that we just did for him, but probably not gonna be able to this time. But
we can ask.
Yeah.
But it would be the jingle is just ask your neighbor, Mike's Fence.
Oh, just ask your neighbor, Mike's Fence Center. That's right. Yeah.
That could be our
some of that
opening
Ben
jingle.
TV.
I can get rights to that one.
Yeah, there you go. Probably not that expensive. Bend is one of those markets though where it has its own TV station and it's so cheap compared to Portland to buy TV in Bend. That's the total difference. You can blanket the district in TV. I had school board. Andy High, I think you might have done his TV. Andy High was buying TV in his school board race. It was so cheap. Now we spent a little bit more on that race for school board than you normally would probably, but still, I mean, it's cheap. It was close to as cheap as mail.
Relatively cheap. And
Portland.
So is Eugene actually, and Medford. Yeah. Like those are two approachable markets, where you can buy TV and even radio to that extent, right? Where you can buy those markets where you're not overbuying for everybody else, that you can do it kind of within that quantified, defined area. It's just easier. So
yeah,
something to think about out there, people, just when you're doing these campaigns, because they shouldn't, going back to that memo, right? Like they said, oh, this race is 600,000 and 850,000. Like they actually shouldn't all be the same cost. There should be a difference. Like those Salem seats those are the hardest ones because you have to buy Portland media to reach a small sliver of Salem market, right? Like those are the toughest ones. And these East Portland ones are just as bad. So there's whereas your statewide Portland media gives you advantage because, in Baker City, they're in the Portland DMA. In Prineville, we're in the Portland DMA. So on satellite and all these other things, I'm seeing KATU out of Portland. So if you're running a statewide media, well, of course, it makes more sense to go buy 1,000, TRPs out of Portland because you're going to get, 2/3 of the population probably sees you, right? So it just makes sense that way. But yeah,
crazy.
The last seat,
go ahead.
House District 40, the one we lost by 168 votes. So Anessa Hartman won the race. Michael Newgard is the challenger. This is Oregon City, Gladstone, kind of in that pocket of 205. Apparently they love tolling. Just kidding. I think it's the worst part of I-205. So tolling is definitely a hot button issue. The voter registration 9.7 moved to 9.3. So the theory would be just with voter registration, we're deadlocked. And so this should be the barn burner of all barn burners because it's moving our way. We've proven that, you can
Yeah.
move the needle here. Um, I think this one we lost. I think we lost this seat. We never had Adam Baker down in the House seat going in. I think we lost because of the Kennemer Meeks stuff. I
Mm.
think that because the Democrats came in with so much money into Mark Meeks' race at the end and got that turnout, I think it pulled Anessa Hartman over the finish line against us, which I'm still kind of pissed about, as you can tell. But I don't see Anessa. I haven't seen a lot of activity there. I've driven through that district and I don't see signs. I don't really see much of anything there. I mean, 123,000 to 69,000 that Newgart's raised. I think most of that has come from bring balance and leadership. So
To
I,
me,
I
Newgard should be able to raise over 100 grand. I mean, that's the part that I'm scratching my head about. It seems like he should be able to be in a competitive, at least dollar for dollar. I'm a little surprised.
yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, all of the Republican challengers have been in that 60, 70 range. That is just not where you need to be. That's
Yeah, you
just
needed to be there a couple months
because if you rip bring
ago.
balance out of there and leadership out of there, they probably all have like, two nickels to rub together. And
Ugh,
and that doesn't show community support. It just doesn't,
yeah,
and you got to have it. So I just think wrong candidate, wrong time that takes this one. I think it'll still be closer than probably their polling is indicating. Um,
mm,
I haven't seen recent polling on this one. I wouldn't give up on it just because of the way it performed last time. But again, it's in Oregon City, so you're dealing with Portland media market. If they should be able to go back and voter ID as best as possible the people that were in that squish middle and
yeah,
focus on it. It's a little easier to approach because Oregon City has its own zip code and some other things you can do from a digital standpoint. I wouldn't give up on it, but I definitely I think it's not going to be as easy as it was. Plus, Anessa's now incumbent, and that means
yeah.
incumbency protection for the Democrats is a real thing. And I would imagine we'll see, a gluttony of TV ads just to make sure. If they don't do it, they must have some internal polling that shows they're really ahead, pretty
Right.
far ahead in this one. And then that would go to candidate quality because I think, at the end of the day, if there was a good candidate, I think they would have to spend money because this district will perform and they should be more Trumpy than some of the other districts. So, and
Yep.
speaking of money, so I'm going to end it on money and then we
Okay.
can, because thank God you split this into two districts because even I'm getting tired or two
Yeah.
episodes. Um, this is why I'm concerned for us. The Democrat House has raised over $2 million, and they
Wow.
have 1.122 million in cash as of October 1st. Evergreen, which is Republicans, raised 509,000, and they're only sitting on 195 cash.
Oh,
So our ability to be competitive in these districts versus their ability to defend is when you have
10 to 1.
yeah, yeah, and you've raised four times as much, whereas last cycle we were on par. So all they're doing is sitting around with their hands out, hoping that, Congressman Walden will come save these districts. And if they're not in a position where, Greg Fields and his team, whatever they come up with, right? Like whatever metric they come up with for funding a challenger races, um, I just think they pass because the work hasn't been done. So
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Well, and the number that matters now, I mean, it's October. The number that matters now is not total money raised. It's how much cash do you have in the bank.
Yeah.
And so, sure, you've been outraised 4x as much. You're down 10 to 1 on cash on hand. That is a problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Walden basically would have to make up the entire deficit in order to put them in a competitive spot in all of those. And I would say this late in the game, it's unlikely he does it for all the races. So now the question is, can he put you in a spot to be competitive in enough races to make gains, right? We seem pretty confident they can hold the four that they've got that Dems are going to target, right? Beyond 53, it seems like the map shrunk on them over the summer.
Yeah, it seems like it. So, we'll see. I think at the end of the day, sometimes holding still is not necessarily a bad a bad thing. We had some good games
Totally.
last cycle, in the House and the Senate. If we can somehow sneak something out of the Senate, I still think that's kind of a long shot, you know, um, to get back to 13, or to stay at 13 in the Senate. It's tough, right? I mean, we don't have a big of a map. We got two
Right.
seats to stay at 13,
Two, three
right? It's like
seats.
you pick
Yeah.
an A or B, like what's your choice? And I think B looks like a little bit of a better lift, but it's still a lift, right? I mean, it's a lift. And I think in the
Yeah.
House, you have a bigger map, but the lift is still there, right? The big and the only way you lift it is with cash. And when you have no cash, and in a presidential year, it should be interesting to see how it all plays out. It's going to be a fun month. I love October. We could use an October surprise in our favor.
Yeah.
I think if we don't get
Yeah.
if we get an October surprise that goes against Republicans, I think we're in
Oh
trouble.
man.
I think all right.
Yeah.
I think we've had all of the setbacks we can have
Yep.
and still be able to maintain our positions in the House and the Senate. But if we get a setback nationally, globally, something that hurts Republicans, it could be a real detriment for us. And
Yeah.
that's my concern is always that. I was really concerned about big wildfires, bleeding off into October and some of those things. I think that's subsided a little bit, but
That's
um,
good.
you know, any big international event that is detrimental to Republicans is my biggest fear. Democrats should worry as far as any sort of Kamala flub, Walls flub of some kind that just turns Democrats off to wanting to turn out the vote. That would be their October surprise of some kind. I
And if
think
I'm
so.
the Harris camp, I tell them do not let Joe Biden in front of a camera or out of the White House for the entire month of October.
Isn't it funny that they're like October 10th to the 20th? He's somewhere in, I forget where it was. He's like, they're sending him on a trip to some country that he's never been. Like no
I
president
would
of the
not
United
do that.
States has ever been.
That is such a mistake. I would not be surprised if they cancel that whatsoever because that's going to get media coverage. I mean that I
But I think sending him away is the best thing for them. And I think the best thing for them is just keeping him on the beach there in,
basement
Delaware, wherever the hell he goes.
the
You know,
basement strategy works.
it worked in 20, man. I would stick with the basement strategy, but they think sending him internationally to go tour. And he's probably like, hey, Jill's probably like, I want to go on a, presidential tour around the different countries. And who are they to say no? But that's probably their biggest concern. I agree with you. Like Biden could be bad if he comes out and says, I never wanted to, they threw me out of here. And I was, blah, 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 blah. Right. If he just goes unhinged because he just gets pissed, like, I don't know. I don't know if that really sinks them, but I think it doesn't help
part
their
part two
cause.
of him putting on the MAGA hat, I guess, was what that
Yeah.
would be.
I wish I
Oh
could think of
man.
some more, but that are October surprises, but then they wouldn't be a surprise, right? So
Yep.
we'll see. The national stuff I think is really going to determine sadly, going to determine maybe a couple of outcomes here, probably with turnout and some of the other things, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna set up a tweet to go out tonight, asking people what local races are they following.
Oh, good.
And we'll have
Okay.
to do. I'm finally gonna have to do some homework, Brian, because that's the last part of this. We turn it into 4 parts this time. We're always looking to extend the content, make it work for us, so that we don't have to work as hard. But appreciate your rundown, your deep data analysis here obviously got a ton of experience in this realm especially from the caucus perspective, working for the Senate, helping out Leader Breeze Iverson. It's a huge lift on the caucus side. A lot of credit to most of the people who are working on those races and working from that perspective. It's a lot of work. We
Oh,
appreciate it as
tons
Republicans.
of work.
And we'll see what happens. Election night's gonna be exciting, though. I think, assuming we're in the same environment where it's like Harris is ahead, but we're not really sure she's ahead. If that's how we're going into election night, I think we
Mhm.
can be excited. I think, like you said, if the October surprise goes hard one way or the other, I think that will, if it goes hard Republican, I'll be excited, but certainly Democrats won't be as excited.
Yeah.
They obviously moved Biden over to avoid that scenario, and then have it happen would be, hilarious,
Well, this is the
honestly.
last Trump election, theoretically, we'll ever have. Donald Trump election, I should say.
Gosh, I hope so. Gosh, I hope so. I'm not 100% confident, Brian.
You think if he loses, he runs again?
I think he said he wouldn't, but somebody pulled up a tweet. Maybe it was not real, and that's what confused me. But it was like, if I lose to Joe Biden, I'm not coming back or whatever. And
Yeah.
obviously he did. So I sure hope so. We do need some change on that front. We need to let some of these young guns out to just kind of fight. It'll be great because it'll basically be a fight about the future of the party. Are we going to be a MAGA party?
Yeah,
Are we going to be something else? Right? What are we going to
I
be?
agree.
And that will determine everything for the Republicans. And I think Democrats, if they lose Trump, they will go on a death spiral a little bit because they
Good.
seem to not be able to handle the losses to Trump. And they'll probably do some soul searching. And are they going to come out the side, the Democratic Socialists of America, or are they going to try to move back to the center? It'll be
Yeah, that's good.
fascinating to
That'd be
watch.
good. Yeah, those will be for good podcast discussions in November, December.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome. Alrighty.
this has been crosstabs.studio. Follow at Brian G. Iverson, Brian Gresham Iverson, as we call him here, at Reagan Canope on Twitter. Thanks so much for listening. Please send this to a friend.